Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we're going to be talking about the others. Last week we were talking about the dragons. This time we're going to talk about the others. And the idea here is that this is the Song of Ice and Fire. And George R. R. Martin has been very clear all the way through that this is about a balance of ice and fire. There are two big threats to the Seven Kingdoms. Well, there are three really. The first is the Civil War. Then we get the twin threats of ice and fire. So if we're looking at one of them, I thought it would make sense for us to look at another one. I thought this time we would just go almost straight into it rather than giving you a big preamble, which I do sometimes. I think what I will do this time is go almost straight into the questions. I think the only thing I would say, just as sort of context for all of this, is that more than most other issues, this is a thing where our ideas, our visualizations come from the TV show a lot more. And that is very different to what is in the books. In the books, I was talking to Aziz when I had Aziz on a couple of weeks ago. It's noticeable that we only get really 3-4 actual interactions with the others at any point in the books, and all of those are brief. We don't get huge amounts of background, we don't get any explanation, we do not get much at all. So we're having to dig into the world around to aid our understanding of what's going on here. And what happened on the TV show, there are a couple of things I think are worth taking from the TV show that I'll mention when we get there. But by and large, what I want to do is restart our understanding of the others by looking at the book version rather than what we might think of from the TV show. I'll do this as I normally do. I've got questions from my patrons. I'll pick up as many questions as I possibly can from the chat as we're going through. What I just probably should say, this is, if you're watching this and this isn't an issue for you, but because of clock changing times, America has changed back this week, last week, I don't know exactly, and the UK hasn't, and a lot of other countries haven't yet. I think we're doing it a little bit later this month, so I've stuck to 5 o'clock Eastern time for this start, and it will be the same next week, but for countries like the UK and elsewhere, it may well be a little bit different. So that's what's happening with the timing, and that is purely a practical decision based on how many people watch this live stream in different parts of the world. Roughly half or a bit more than half are actually in that time zone, so I decided to stick to that one. Okay, I think that's enough talking. Let's go into a few questions. First of all, from Seltz, saying, how do you think the deal between Craster and the others was crafted? Obviously, both sides benefited from the deal, as Craster would give his sons to them and the others were granted fresh bodies for their army. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts how this brokerage may have come to pass. And the Children of Jack Acid added, it just seems like a big plot hole, to be honest. How would the others and Craster communicate and negotiate a plan whereby Craster would offer up his sons to become others and or White Walkers? Considering that Craster offers up his own sons, I can't imagine that this was a tradition passed down to him from his father, and he seems to have no ties with other wildling tribes. He might have taught him similar rites. So what gives? Okay, so this is good opening question, I think, because this is one of the key points of mystery that I think we have in all of this is what is the role of Craster, and I think it's worth understanding what he says about the others, so we can actually get an understanding of what that relationship is between him and the others, because I think a lot of us go into this thinking that this is some kind of negotiated deal. I don't think it was actually like that. So this is what when Craster's talking about the others to the Night's Watch when they're sheltering at Craster's Keep, he says this: a godly man got no cause to fear such. I said as much to that man's raider once when he comes sniffing round. He never listened, no more than you crows with your swords and your bloody fires. That won't help you none when the white cold comes. Only the gods will help you then. You best get right with the gods. Now, I think that is absolutely pivotal to understanding his approach to the others. He doesn't see them as just another creature. He sees them as gods. This is an offering up to them. This is not a matter of a kind of a negotiated settlement. He's going to get this very clear set of advantages from it. He is just trying to buy goodwill by offering up and his children to his sons, to the others. And it's noticeable that we read when he doesn't have sons, he will offer up a sheep. So it's not a matter of this is just he's made an agreement to hand over sons. He's making an offering. And that is what is going on from his perspective. So I don't think there actually was any direct contact in terms of like a conversation. So how that might have started, I think we'll probably never know exactly. But this is a practice that other wildlings we hear have done, offering up sacrifices to the cold gods, the others. So this is something that if people have heard about it, Craster himself will have heard about it. It's not that he will have learned from other people. And maybe he saw an other and maybe he offered up a sacrifice to them there and then it just turned into a habitual thing. Something along those lines seems to me to be the most logical answer to what's going on there. Now, yes, there could be other explanations, much more detailed things, but that's where Occam's razor takes me. Is this is simply him doing what lots of other wildlings do, but it just happens to be he's the person that we see and we interact with and we talk to, or the Night's Watch talk to in the story. So that on one level it's quite a dull answer, but I think that's probably the most likely thing. The question is that I think the more interesting question that follows on from that is, what do the White Walkers get from this? What do the others get from this? Do they actually want sheep? I mean, what would the others want with sheep? They probably, presumably, are okay with people worshipping them, with people giving stuff to them. They're all right with that. That's not a problem. The babies, though, the young children, do they do something with that? We do not know. Is this just a pure sacrifice? Is this like on the TV show, they take them away and sort of all the way up to their home base, and then they do some sort of ceremony and turn them into others themselves? Is there something like that going on? It's possible, but we simply have no evidence for it yet in the books, other than the fact that Craster's wives refer to the others as their brothers. They think that that's what's going on. Whether it actually is another matter, but that's what they think is going on. Reflective rambling. Tinfoil. Robert's taking off next week so that he can go off to Australia to wish Cloaked One a happy belated birthday in person on the 16th. Well, first of all, happy belated name day, Cloaked One. I hope you had a fantastic day, and all the very, very best to you. As to taking off, it's not actually next week. I know I'm confused some people with this. I do apologize. Next week I will be here. It's the week after that I'm going to be taking off. So I will be here next week. I will be talking about Galadriel next week. I will have a guest on next week. It's the week after I decided to take off. But thank you very much for that, and happy birthday to Cloaked One. Roman Lakovets saying, what made George R. R. Martin think he could finish Winds in 2016 if it isn't even close now? Could he have scrapped everything and started over? I want to remain optimistic about it despite everything. Okay, well, I mean, the short answer is we don't know. He's not told us. He has been writing. I'm not going to go over the ground that we went over last week. We dissected in detail his update, so I'm not going to go and do that again. But why was it that he thought he could finish it years ago, 6 years ago? He thought that he could finish it literally in a matter of months. The first obvious answer is that he was writing a lot faster back then. We know that he was focusing pretty much just on the books. Now he is clearly focusing on a lot of other things as well as just the main story. I do think probably I believe him, incidentally. I should probably say I do believe him when he says that not this last year but the year before, 2020, was a very productive year for him. All of the mood music coming out from there was that he did write a lot. We hear about a lot of different chapters. We heard about progress. I do believe that he was writing a lot there. I think there are two answers to this, if I had to speculate. The first answer is that this book is a lot bigger than he thought it was going to be. And I think we've all assumed this was going to be a massive book. He is writing a lot. There is going to be a huge amount. I did a video ages ago asking how big is this book going to be. I think I came to the conclusion of at least 1,600 pages. And that was being relatively conservative with estimates of what would be needed. And that's purely based on my assumption, which I think is a fair assumption, which is that book was going to take us up to the point where Dany had arrived in Westeros with her army or whatever it was that she was bringing with her, and the others have, if not breached the wall, then reached the wall. So we've got the two threats finally reaching Westeros. That seemed like the logical place to end that bit of the story and cue it up for a final book. Just going through the amount of bits of story that had to be told in order to get there. We've got storylines going on the Riverlands. We've got King's Landing. We've got Dawn. We've got Dany in Marine. We've got Dany and Dothraki Sea. What's happening in Marine? We've got Arya. We've got Bran. We've got what's happening at the Wall, Winterfell. All these different things. Old Town. Loads and loads and loads of different stories. So it's simply a huge book. That's the first answer. The second answer is, we have to be honest and say this has now been over 10 years. And yeah, maybe he might tell us afterwards, maybe there has been something he's had to rewrite. We know that in A Dance with Dragons, he had a big problem. He called it the Milanese knot. This was what he called his writing block, which was him trying to work out which order the many different people who were going to arrive in Marine had to arrive in order for the story to work most effectively. And he wrote several different versions of this and tried it out, and then before finally deciding on the order that he wanted those people to arrive in. I could easily see a very similar thing happening in, say, the Riverlands. There are so many different characters and so many different groups in the Riverlands just at the moment. How the story develops will depend on which point they each meet each other, and they could meet each other at completely different orders. So maybe there is something that he's rewriting. I don't go in for the theory that he is writing A Dream of Spring at the same time. He's been very clear that he's not. That doesn't seem to be a thing that he's ever done, writing two books like that simultaneously. So yeah, I don't know is the short answer. I think he will be honest and tell us once it is written, and I do still believe he will write it. Once it is written, I think he will be honest and tell us what it is. Carolina Blues saying, "This is great. Thanks for the hard work. You are very welcome indeed." Cloaked One, I see you now there in the chat. Happy belated birthday to you. Let's get a question from Lindsay Petrushok saying, "Do you think the others will ride giant spiders in the books?" So this is something that the fandom love the idea of. I love the idea of the icy fire spiders are mentioned 3, maybe 4 times in the story we've had so far. Old Nan tells Bran, Sam remembers them, then Sam, I think, talks to Jon about them. This is part of the legend that has persisted, has gone all the way through, and people are still remembering in Westeros on icy spiders, giant ice spiders. And what does it mean? Is it possible? Yeah, it's a fantasy story. Why can't we have giant ice spiders? And George R. R. Martin has mentioned them a few times. So yeah, I like the idea that that's what's going to happen. We haven't seen it happen yet, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I like it. No evidence one way or the other than the fact that he's queued this up a couple of times. Cloaked One, picking up, thank you very much. I love it when you do this, picking up questions for other people. Picking up for Milo Connor. Is it possible that others want to turn people into zombies because they know this is the only way for mankind to survive the long nights in any way, shape, or form? I don't personally think so, because in order to be turned into a wight, you have to die first. And the internal logic there is that the others are turning people into wights because they think this is how they're going to survive. They would have died anyway by this point, so they're not actually extending their life. I don't think so. I will get into what their motivations are in a bit, but it doesn't quite hang together for me. This feels like the wights are controlled by the others. They are not possessing of their old personalities. They're not possessing of independent thought, as far as we can tell. So no, this isn't about preserving the person. This is about animating corpses. This is literally about creating zombies. Question from Ben. I was thinking on something you said in a previous live stream about the children of the forest not viewing death the same way due to them having proof of an afterlife in the weirwoods. Due to this, maybe they didn't create the others as a weapon to fight humans, but as an existential threat that would force both races to work together to survive. This means the use of the word pact and the adoptions of the old gods by the first men makes more sense to me, and also why the children don't seem to be able to control the others. Well, I like thinking on this one. I don't think I would agree with it. Partly because why would you need them to threaten you as well as the people who are currently destroying everything about you and your life and your livelihood? I don't think, for me, that logic doesn't quite hold. Why would they create something that would threaten them both? But taking an even more meta view on this, if you look at the others, if you go with the assumption that they were made by the children of the forest in some way, and the closest we've got to from George R. R. Martin, incidentally, on this, back in the days when he was answering questions about these kinds of things, the closest we've ever got to him talking about this is saying that the relationship between the children of the forest and the others will be explored a bit more in future books. So there clearly is some link between them. That's as far as we can say for sure. He has mentioned that there is a link between them, and we can speculate on what that is. But if we take the assumption, which I think is a reasonable working assumption, that they were created in some way by the children of the forest, what are they? They are a creation, a weapon that uses humanity's strength against itself, that is built to withstand humanity's attacks. They are seemingly invulnerable to attack from normal human weapons. They are stronger than humans. And crucially, they can use the big thing for the children of the forest is that whereas the children of the forest didn't reproduce hugely quickly, humanity does. And that was the big problem for them, is that this was just getting worse and worse and worse, their situation. So what the others do is use that strength against humanity, use the numbers of humans against humanity. You kill one human, you don't just get rid of one human because they would be replaced, but then that becomes part of your side. So this is, if you had to design a baddie that would be well suited to fight humanity, the others are it. Also, bringing the cold. This is a thing we know that humanity doesn't like. Their fire is the thing that they were using hugely against the children of the forest. So we've got that half of the equation. The other half of the equation is, what are the others' apparent weaknesses? We know one of them, which is dragonglass. And that's a really curious weakness to have. Why dragonglass? Dragonglass is what the children of the forest used. We've not really heard about anyone else using it all that much, maybe for a bit of decoration here or there, but this was their main tool. And the others are vulnerable to it, like ridiculously vulnerable to it. Sam, who's not a great fighter, literally just sort of like did that and killed an other. It just like not melted, but just like fractured and died before his eyes. It did not take a great warrior. It was literally the tool that he was using. So the other's greatest weakness is the thing that the children of the forest have. They appear to have other weaknesses as well, like the not being able to cross water. That's something that we can imply from the way that the wall stops at the water. And then you look at where are the children's main strongholds. Well, the Isle of Faces is an island. The dragonglass comes from Dragonstone, which is an island. If we buy into the idea that the sword Dawn is Lightbringer or was some useful weapon against the others, where is that based? On an island. This is something which is not ever written down anywhere, but it does seem to make sense. So all of this is a sort of slightly long-winded way to say that they are not created, it would appear, to be able to get at the children. The children seem to have some inbuilt defenses against the others, whereas the others' strengths outweigh humanity's strengths. Cloaked One picking up for our chic Jenna. Are the others a hive mind, or do they think individually? Well, this is a good question. They seem to be individual from what we've seen. They act individually. The scene we see them in the most is that prologue, and there is definitely one of them who seems to be acting independently of the others and then communicating to the others, saying something to the others, and they're all laughing. That's not really a kind of a hive mind kind of thing, because why would you need to do that if you have a hive mind? But it is noticeable also that the way that scene is set up, the Waymar Royce scene is set up, is you get this one other fighting Waymar Royce, and then the others sort of standing around in a circle watching what's going on until we're told, and I haven't got the exact phrasing in front of me, but they're as if moving on some unspoken cue, they all then act and come in and kill Waymar. So it's possible that there's some sort of telepathy idea going on there, but I don't think it's a hive mind. They do definitely seem to have spoken language, and they seem to be saying things to each other. But it's an interesting question. But I think it's sort of maybe partway between the two. Love Lisa saying, to complete the egg hatching, Danny sacrifices an old woman, a man in his prime, and a newborn. Could Rhaegar's birth be what made Egg's attempt fail? Okay, so this is Summerhall. So it's not directly related to the others, but I'm very happy to pick up on this. We don't know what made Egg's attempt fail. We will perhaps find out in the last Duncan Egg book. We may perhaps find out in Fire and Blood Part 2, both of which, incidentally, we will see earlier than we would otherwise as a result of what George R. R. Martin has revealed about his writing priorities. He's already 200 pages into Fire and Blood Part 2, and he's talked about making a bit of a hurry on Duncan Egg as well. So we expect more of that sooner than you might otherwise have thought. So at the moment, Summerhall's a mystery. But what we do know is that when Danny hatched those dragons, that George R. R. Martin has described this as being everything was exactly right. And that's the intentionality from what Danny was doing, the sacrifices, the fire, the red comet in the sky. It's possible that from what he was saying, you can imply the fact that it just wasn't quite right when Egg tried to do it. But the echo is definitely there. George R. R. Martin has left us with a very clear echo that what Danny did was symbolically what Egg was trying to do, but what he tried to do was hatch dragons, and Rhaegar was hatched. So 3 people died. The king, Egg, the king's oldest son, Duncan, and Sir Dunk, who has a crown prince died for him, and so he symbolically is sort of king's blood-ish. And so those 3 deaths as a sacrifice, plus the fire and blood, leads to a dragon hatching, which is Rhaegar. So that was what was symbolically going on there. My best understanding is that George R. R. Martin is saying it simply wasn't the right time and the right place. DM Collins saying, is it possible every element has its own man-like other? Ice equals others, water equals hinted at dragony deep ones, earth equals the children, fire equals dragon riders or red priests, and if so, could dragons be the last minute surprise ally? Dagon's. Oh, sorry, Dagon's deep ones. Dagon's be last minute surprise ally. Well, yeah, interesting. I like it. I think we can overplay the elements in our understanding of this, in terms of this doesn't seem to be like an Avatar world where the elements we have these like 4 elements or whatever that different types of magic are attached to them. That doesn't seem to be where George R. R. Martin is going with this. He's very much focusing on ice and fire. We do get water, but and there are magics associated with water, but the belief of what this might be does seem to vary. We have the Krakens, for example. We don't know who they are. I suspect we might see them in the Winds of Winter. The deep ones are not mentioned, I think, enough for them to be actually making an appearance in the main story. There's, I think, 1 or 2 mentions in the main story, and then we just get some other things in the world of Ice and Fire. My general take is that if George R. R. Martin is going to introduce a world-changing thing, he will tease it. He will give us the cues beforehand. He will show us where this is coming from. We've had the cues, I think, about Krakens, but not about deep ones. Earth, you're talking about the children. Are they the same? I don't think they don't give the impression that they are the others. They are just the natural life forms that are there, like the giants or direwolves or anything else like that. So I like the thinking. I don't think it quite holds. I think that this is the two main elements of ice and fire rather than the four elements. But yeah, it's there will be more, I think, on this, but it's not going to be quite that clear cut. Cloaked One picking up for Minty Scales, saying, "Hi, Robert. Hi there. Are those who have been brought back to life or unlife, like Beric and Lady Stoneheart, an example of fire wights?" Ooh, well, George R. R. Martin he used this phrase. This is where we get this phrase from. They, however, seem to be different to ice wights in the sense that an ice wight is someone who has been killed and they are dead and gone, and then as far as we can tell, the others go in and control that body. That's what's going on there. The fire wights are people who died, but then before the something that lingers, which is how we understand about the sort of the human soul in this world, before that has fully gone, the body gets reanimated, and what is left of the spirit is in control of the body. So there's not someone else coming in to be in control, it's what is left of the spirit that is there. So Beric is still Beric. Beric is still in control. It's just that every time he comes back, there's a little bit less of who he is. It's not that there's somebody else coming in and taking control of him, there's less of him there. Lady Stoneheart was dead for a number of days, which is why when she comes back, a lot of her old Catelyn personality has gone, and it's just the bits that were clinging on, which is the need for revenge. That's why she is like she is. So George R. R. Martin talks about them as being fire wights, and he talks about this as being sort of setting up, foreshadowing what might be happening with Jon. He doesn't say it in exactly those words because he's always slightly hedged his language when it comes to Jon and him coming back and things like that, because firstly I think he didn't want to spoil the TV show, but then secondly I think it's going to be a slightly different thing with Jon. I don't want to go into that. I've talked about that before, but fire wights are different to ice wights. They just have a slightly different way that the magic works. What this does mean, though, is that we have got a lot more complicated picture in the books than we did on the TV show. On the TV show, then it was presented very much, this is the living against the dead. That's not what this is going to be like at all in the books. We're going to have Jon, who will have died and then come back. We're going to have Lady Stoneheart. We're going to have down south, we're going to have the mountain. Maybe we're going to have people being more, the mountain seems like a prototype. There will be more where that came from. There are lots, maybe even somebody like Melisandre may turn into being a fire, what may appear, be revealed as being a fire wight. There's a lot going on that is not just humanity's all the living. So it's a complicated situation. But ice wights and fire wights share a same name, and it's George R. R. Martin's fault. He said it, but they are different things. Let's go. Have I got another question in the chat? I think I might be. I think I might be caught up there. Andrew K saying, considering the others seem to have a version of Warging and almost certainly Children of Forest created, is it not plausible at least some of them have weirwood net access or a form of greensight? Yes, absolutely. So I think that when I was saying telepathy, I think that's what I was meaning, was that they are, and I'm probably getting ahead of some of the other questions I've got queued up here, but let's pick it up here. The way that this looks like, and again, we haven't had confirmation of this in the books, but the way that this looks like is that this is a sort of a distorted version of being a greenseer or a warging. Bran can warg into living things, the others can warg into dead things, and almost certainly they can, the way that Bran will be able to sort of communicate and see things on a more astral plane, that almost certainly will be mirrored in some way by the others. So that, yes, I think it's there. We haven't had the explanations of this at all, but it's so I don't think it's a hive mind in the sense that they all are of one mind about things. They do seem to be different and independent, but they do seem to be able to communicate in ways that are not just talking. Right, let's go to a question from Lady Pushkin saying, "Hi Robert, do you see the others as a species and capable of breeding and therefore different to wights, which are created by their magical abilities?" Well, yes, let's get into the question of what the others are. They are different to wights. Wights are under their control. They are animated dead people. They are zombies. So that's what's going on there. The George R. R. Martin has, and I've got the quote here because this is the best quote that we have, I think, to help us understand how he conceptualizes the others. He says that they are strange, beautiful, think of the she made of ice, something like that. A different sort of life, inhuman, elegant, dangerous. And he's said that they're not dead. They are another kind of life, a different sort of life. So that is what George R. R. Martin describes them as being. The reference to the she here, these are like the fairies of classical mythology. There's in lots of sort of Celtic mythology as well as various other places. So they are, and I think the best modern example of if anyone's seen or read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, fantastic book, really recommend it. They have the fairies in the fairy kingdom there, and that's the closest sort of modern version of this that I've seen, which is the idea of the fairies, the she. They are inhuman and beautiful, but completely, their motivations are beyond us. They are captivating, they are interesting, they move with great elegance, they are incredibly magical, but they're different to us. It's not just like they're humans who have lived apart for a long time and got different cultures and traditions. They're as a form of life, they are different, and so we simply cannot understand how their brains work. That is the kind of feel that George R. R. Martin is wanting to go for here. So in terms of whether they are a species capable of breeding, we simply do not know. George R. R. Martin has not told us that, but they are different, and it's possible because of this that we, and I will get on to what I think their motivations are in a bit, but it's possible that we, although we will understand a bit more about why they're doing what they're doing, there will be an element, if they are like the she, there will always be an element of, but that's not how we think. But that's not, we don't understand what's going on there. So they are not undead. They are completely different. And another thing that I want to bring this around to in terms of the origin of them is I think we have to, even if you don't think it applies here, we have to look with A Song of Ice and Fire for what the great primal bit of magic was that changed everything. And what I mean by that is that on the back cover of the first edition of Book One, A Game of Thrones, written by George R.R. Martin, the opening sentence is a preternatural magical event has long ago, a preternatural magical event changed the season so everything is out of balance. That is the framing. I probably slightly misquoted it, but that's the meaning. That's the framing for the entire series. And whenever we're trying to explain to somebody completely new about the world, it's probably the first thing we say. The seasons are out of balance, but we often forget about it because there's all these other things going on with the story, and it's just such a part of natural life and nobody questions it. But the fact that there was a preternatural event, a magical event, which made that happen means that we have to think about what possibly could have happened that is so powerful that it caused this imbalance in the world. One such thing could be the creation of a completely new form of life, the others. Or, and I'm not saying I believe this, but I think this is another way that this could have happened, the opening of a portal to another world, and those people coming, the others, a different form of life coming through, that would also meet that criteria of something which is so earth-shattering that it just shifts the entire way that the world works and leaves everything out of balance because something is wrong. So that is something I think we always have to keep to the back of our minds, as I said, is that one life earth-shattering moment, magical moment, was the creation of the others, the invitation of the others. That's something that does not belong in this world. This has put the world out of balance, and that is what George R. Martin is saying, that the others are like. They are different. They are inhuman. They are like the she. So that's my working theory. We have very little to go on with this, but there has to be something, and that at the moment seems to be the most likely thing. So let's go to a couple of questions from the chat. Reflective Rambling, thank you very much. Picking up for Ryan Tierney, saying, could the others be seen as the embodiment of the stranger by the faith of the seven and or the faith militant? Yeah, possibly. The thing is that faith, at the moment, the faith of the seven, because they're so tied in with the maesters and with what happens south of the wall, they've not really engaged with this. Not many people have, to be fair, but they've not engaged with the idea of the others in the way that Melisandre has clearly engaged with this idea of the others are here. I know who they are theologically. The faith of the seven hasn't. And what we're going to have with the faith of the seven very probably is at least one, if not two, of the following things: the destruction of the Great Sept and the destruction of the Starry Sept in Old Town. Those are the two centers of the faith of the seven. When I say one or both of them, Cersei may well blow up the Great Sept. We don't know, but it makes sense for her to do something like that. Euron is probably going to attack Old Town, and the Starry Sept is an obvious place for him to be destroying, because he's wanting to be the god, and so he wouldn't allow any other gods to be worshipped, so the destruction of that makes sense. So one or both of those will, I suspect, happen. What does that mean in real terms on the ground? That means that the faith of the seven is not going to die, because the faith of the seven is out across the entire seven kingdoms, but the leadership of the faith will be gone. And so what you're going to have is just all of these different roving septons and scepters and followers of the faith, who each have to come to their own conclusions about what's going on, even when the others start to appear and become real in people's lives. So I don't think that we're going to see the Faith of the Seven coming out with a pronouncement of officially what the others are. But we will see lots of faithful people potentially each coming to their own conclusions. And what you're suggesting there as being the embodiment of the stranger, that makes a lot of sense. If you're a member of the Faith of the Seven and you see an other, then yes, that does certainly seem to be a logical conclusion from that religious perspective. Auspicious, thank you very much. A very generous super sticker, thank you. Question from, I think I had another one. Yep, from Cash Dummy saying, George R. R. Martin purportedly hates fan fiction. If we go beyond theorizing and crowdsource Winds of Winter ourselves intellectually, that might motivate him. I mean, crowdsource it. See, I mean, who to write it? I don't know. I think he's motivated. I really do. I love the idea, by the way. But I think he is motivated, but he's motivated by lots of things now. That's the problem, is that it's no longer his priority. It's not that he doesn't want to write this. It's just that he wants to write Fire and Blood Part 2. He wants to be actively involved in all of the TV shows. He wants to write Dunk and Egg. He wants to do all of these things. So that's the issue. He purportedly hates fan fiction. Yes, he's got a very... It's noticeable that you can look at the different franchises across the piece and see how much does their creator want to have a creative influence over what they look like. And the different, just looking at the things that I cover on this channel, the difference between all of the different the three different writers or estates, being The Witcher, A Song of Ice and Fire, and The Lord of the Rings, is marked. You get the Tolkien estates position, although they are very hot on not wanting things to be against what Tolkien wrote, in theory at least. In practice, they have a lot more wiggle room than they like to pretend they do. But they seem okay about things that are outside of that. So the example that Tom Shippey, the eminent Tolkien scholar, came up with when he was briefly on board with the Amazon TV show before he left it, was that the first period of the Second Age, when Sauron was around, but we don't know what he was doing. As far as the Tolkien estate's concerned, you can write whatever you want there as long as it doesn't contradict what happens later. So that seems to be the approach of the Tolkien estate. Andrzej Sapkowski, the writer of The Witcher, has got a completely hands-off approach. His view, or his approach to the TV show of The Witcher, is not only does he not want to be involved in writing or executive producing it, he just wants to be shown what they've done in advance before other people do. He wants to be able to see it so that he can then answer questions about it later. He's very happy for them to take, and Witcher Season 2 had some big changes compared to the books, but he was completely fine with that. George R. R. Martin, his latest blog post was very strong about wishing to maintain canon in the TV shows. Now, he may well have been stung by what happened in The Song of Ice in Game of Thrones, the TV show. Feel free to speculate on that. But he came out being very clear that he wanted to be very involved in all of the TV shows to make sure that they were canon. So he's got a very strong, compared to the other two, a very, very strong position on this, which it took me a long way. So that was a slight digression away from the original question about fan fiction. Yeah, he doesn't like fan fiction very much. He has, I think, a couple of times gone on record about that. Quick one, a meme question for Honey Wine. What is the Night King's tax policy? The Night King. Well, if you're talking about the Night King as opposed to the Night's King, although they might be the same, it does appear that if you consider yourself to be under the remit of the Night King's rule, then you must provide a tithe or sacrifice as by way of a tax, as Craster does. That appears to be what their going rate is. They leave him alone if he provides them with the tax of the baby tax. Let's put it that way. Rather gruesome. The Night's King seem to have a relatively similar policy, actually. Where have we got to? But thank you for the question. I love doing these kind of things. And incidentally, for those who like those sort of economics and politics ones, I've got another one coming out tomorrow about the politics of the Shire. So if you've ever wondered what the political situation was in the Shire, I've done one about the economy of the Shire, but how was the Shire governed? What was the mayor's role? What are the sheriffs? What does the Thane do? Is there any kind of democratic accountability? There are answers to all of these things if you dig into the Tolkien's works, and I have done that for you. So if you're interested in that, that's coming out tomorrow. DM Collins, thank you very much, saying, is there evidence of some smart maesters or septons, maybe with spy networks, etc., secretly coming around to the horror of others being real and taking discreet precautions, moving assets, etc.? I love that idea, but no, we don't have any evidence of it, I'm afraid. We do get records of some maesters going north of the wall. There is one maester whose name I forget, who is at Hardhome and was in Hardhome for quite some time, for a few years. And we get some who have investigated north of the wall and looked at old investigated the Children of the Forest and the like, but not in the current way of thinking. Most of the position of the Citadel seems very, very clear. The others do not exist. And indeed, Ned was very clear that would be what Maester Lewin's position was, and he was a very eminent maester. So that was the Citadel's position, and there was nothing. And to be fair to them, actually nothing had changed for thousands of years. This does just seem like a myth. If they did exist, they've not been around for a long time. So no, we don't get any evidence of any maesters doing any of that kind of stuff. Maybe we will get something in the next book, but as it stands, the others have stayed north of the wall. The only people who've seen them have been a few members of the Night's Watch. It's not I don't think we can blame them yet. Sam Day, well, we can always blame the maesters, but maybe not on this issue. Sam Day, hey Robert, what do you think about the possibility of the others attacking from other parts of the world, like Dawn or Essos? Right, I think Dawn, no. I work on the assumption, which I vaguely name checked a bit earlier, but I think it's a fair assumption that they cannot cross open water in some way. This is, George R. R. Martin has picked on something which is in ancient mythologies for various creatures. It's the same, we hear it in various myths of vampires and werewolves and things like that in a lot of Europe as well. So this is an understandable trope if he has picked up on it. I don't think, therefore, Dawn, because they would have to go across water and come around. But there are several indications that in the first long night, the others did come at the far end of Essos. And where the five forts are now, that appears to be the equivalent of the wall. The five forts to defend eastern Essos against the others. And it kind of makes sense that maybe if you're thinking that the North Pole is where their home base is, the lands of Overwinter, Always Winter, then would say when they start moving and they bring the cold weather with them, they bring the winter with them, and we see this in the prologue. It's quite literal. As they move, the air gets colder, and it's the two Night's Watchmen, not so much Waymar Royce, who's really not an admirable character in this respect. The other two are very clear. This is cold. This is unnaturally cold. There's something going on here. Things start to crack and freeze simply as the others start walking to them. They bring freezing temperatures with them, and if they are then on the move, then that could create a land bridge from the North Pole of Planetos across into wherever the sort of the northeastern bit of Essos is. So it makes sense. I think we won't see it, but we will probably hear rumors of it when the others attack Westeros. Question from Cloaked One, picking up for a Dragon Warg. How did Craster survive for so long between the Children of the Forest, Free Folk, others, and the Night's Watch? Is it Bloodraven related somehow? How did he achieve his deal with the others? I talked about the deal with the others at the beginning of the live stream, so I won't go back over that other than to reiterate that I don't see this as a deal. He viewed them as gods, and he was offering up sacrifices to the gods. That was how that was working. So the others seem to be happy to leave him alone. He is actually relatively close to the wall, so it's not as if he's one of the first people for them to be coming. I don't think he'll survive when they're clearing all the way through the haunted forest. I don't think that he's going to survive then. They will get rid of him. He'll have to move on. How did he survive with the Night's Watch? Because he had this tacit understanding with them that John kind of teases out, and he's not very happy about it because they can see that Craster does some horrible things, and why don't the Night's Watch do something about this? It's because they find it useful to have somewhere where the rangers can stop off for the night, get warm, get something to eat, and get intelligence about what is going on around the area. And in return, they can provide him with some things that he wants. So they've got this understanding. And the rangers of the Night's Watch make sure everybody's aware of it. So that's how they survive there. The Children of the Forest, there simply aren't many of them left. That's all that we have. So there are some up around Bloodraven's cave. That's where Leaf and Co. are, but not many others. So that's what's going on with them. And with the wildlings, most wildlings leave each other alone. And there aren't... The north of the wall is massive. There are lots of wildlings, but they're spread out over a huge area, and there was no reason for any of them to come and attack Craster. So that's how he managed to survive for so long. He just set up home, and there was no reason for anyone else to be sort of bothering him. Matt Savino, if the others can't cross water, why did the letter John get from Hardhome mention dead things in the water? Well, first of all, the others aren't dead things. So this isn't, I think, a reference to the others being in the water. Secondly, I think that we have to say this is very vague language. We don't know what this might be. Dead things in the water, they could simply be reporting lots of things have died and are just floating in the water. It could be that. That's what dead things in the water could mean. The wights perhaps can go through water. If they can sort of go, I don't know, can they just sort of walk in, and if they don't need to breathe anymore because they're dead, so there's no reason why another can't sort of effectively command one of the wights to go into the water. So that could happen. We don't know exactly how their control works. Maybe there's kind of a limit on how far they could go out. But yes, there's the potential that it's the wights, not the others. Question from this is Cloaked One. Thank you, Cloaked One. You've been very generous today. This is picking up for Josh Hall. Could the extinction of the others and the dragons cause the final death of magic and the resolution of the weird seasons? Yes, although it's whether it's the final death of magic is a different matter. I think that we're still expecting Bran, for example, to survive and the Weirwood network to survive, and that is magical, and there are various other kinds of magical things which will survive. So I don't think magic per se will go, and I don't think it is the preternatural event which set the seasons out of balance was a magical one. So magic was there beforehand, so it's not the getting rid of magic that is going to be the thing which resets everything. What it is, though, likely to be, is that whatever was caused by that preternatural event, if that is set right in some way, if that magic is undone in some way, then that would potentially set everything back right again. So I don't think it's about the dragons. The dragons seem to be a separate thing to this. They are a big threat, but they are not to do with this. Now, I always hesitate to say this because this is a thing which was on the TV show and is not going to be in the books. But I think we can perhaps understand some of the thinking of what George R.R. Martin might have said to the showrunners to help us understand what is going on and what might work in the end, which is how the White Walkers were finished on the TV show. The way that they did it there on the TV show, and again, I'll stress that I'm not saying it's not going to happen like this in the books, but the way it happened there, they explained it in afterwards as to the creation of the White Walkers was done in front of a weirwood tree by dragonglass being pressed into the heart of the Night King. How the Night King was not killed, but it was by the magic being undone, that original magic being undone by, in front of a weirwood tree, Valyrian steel being pushed into the heart of the Night King. That was what it was. And the nugget I think we can take from that is not, for the third time, it's not that that's what's going to happen in the books, but the key was the magic, the creation magic being undone. So I think that is looking quite likely to be how the others finally, how their threat finally gets dealt with. If they were created by the Children of the Forest, can they be uncreated? Can we undo that magic? And if that magic, the creation of the others, was that preternatural magical event that created the seasons being out of balance, undoing it would be the thing which restores everything to balance. And I think that the story will end with the seasons being back in balance or returning to balance at the very least. Lambrus saying, how do you think the others will be defeated in the books? Well, excellent. Well, thank you for the question. I was pretty much answering this one there. So I think it is a matter of undoing the magic. So I will just sort of unpack that just an extra level. I don't think it's going to be by stabbing the Night King. I don't think the Night King as an entity will be there. George R. R. Martin talks about his version of the Night's King, which he prefers, which seems to imply the Night King is completely made up for the show. But the undoing of that magic, how might that magic be undone? I do not know. I don't think anyone knows, because we do not know exactly how it was done in the first place. I think that there's a fair chance that the magic happened somewhere very central and important, like the Isle of Faces, perhaps. So maybe, given the fact that we know the Isle of Faces will be important, George R. Martin has basically confirmed that it will be important later in the books. Maybe that's going to be the scene of the undoing. Maybe we need to get the others there, and then the magic to be undone in some way. I do not think that this is going to end just with humanity having a better army and being able to fight them and getting a whole load of dragon glass and Valyrian steel, and that is the thing which wins the day. I don't think that that is how this is going to work. This is going to, yes, there will be battles, there will be some victories and a lot of losses, but I think that the final solution is a magical one. It's not a battle one. Michael James, thank you very much for the super sticker. And I think with that, well, Callie Summers, quick question saying, do you think the others might win the war? Maybe we'll see their perspective. The final book is only a dream of spring. It's not its return. Maybe spring just becomes a dream. Well, yeah. I mean, I have had that thought myself. A dream of spring does feel like, this is just a hope of it. But I think the majority of that book will be dreaming and hoping for the end of the long winter, so the long night. So that the book title holds up. I think there's not a problem there. I think the Bran's direwolf being called Summer is as big a literary clue as the name of the final book, in that I think Bran, the idea of summer, because the direwolves' names reflect the fate of their owners, summer implies that this is what Bran will be ruling over, not just spring, but the going forward in the slightly longer term. So I think that's what we're looking at. Might we see this suddenly from an others perspective? I don't think we're going to go that far. I think we will get to understand the others. I think that we may have some clever things with Bran's magic where we get to see their creation, see something about where they're coming from, what they're doing. I think we will understand a lot more about them, but I don't think that we will get to the point of actually having a POV from them. Do I think they'll win? I think that they will get very close to winning, but I think that they will be undone at the end. Okay, let's go to a question from Ninja Robbo saying, hi Robert, hope you're well. I am, thank you. This is my first Patreon question and I'm excited to ask about my favorite character. Very brief pause just to say, well, welcome to Patreon. If I wanted to say thank you to my patrons, because I cannot do this without your support, so thank you. If you would like to support this channel, the very best way to do that is through Patreon. There is a link down in the description. I've got a whole load of extra stuff coming up for patrons over the course of the next few weeks. I recorded, if you're a patron and you haven't picked up on this yet, do go and have a look. I did a video day before yesterday about George R. R. Martin's original plan for A Song of Ice and Fire, which is based on a letter that he wrote to his agent while he was writing book one, about 13 chapters in. So this is very high level, very early, but there is a lot of really interesting stuff there. And I read out that letter in its entirety for my patrons. So if you're interested in what that letter says, patrons do go and check that out. And I've got another couple of things lined up for patrons over the next couple of weeks as well. And while I'm doing thank yous, moderators, you are amazing. Thank you. You do fantastic work. If you are watching this live and in the chat, please do give a whole load of love to the moderators. Right, where was I? Ninja Robbo. Asking about his favourite character. What do you think about Sir Waymar Dance With Me Royce being Azora High, which is why the others thought they'd need 7-1 against him, and why we haven't seen much of the others since the prologue, as they are now chilling, pun intended, good pun, north of the wall, having destroyed the biggest threat to their species. Well, to start with... Well, actually, what I might do is I might go on to a second question, which is related to this, and talk about all of this up in one. This is Bear Island saying, there seems to be wide agreement that in the prologue, the others were watching out for Starks and Valyrian steel, and proceeded differently once they confirmed that the 3 members of the Night's Watch had neither. Valyrian steel is clearly a threat, but what about Starks? Are they an ancient enemy? Or something the others need? Will we find out that Starks are a key to the creation and propagation of the others, or even the other way around? Okay, so let's talk about Waymar Royce and the prologue. Just to pick up on the point there about are the others just sort of chilling in the north, having destroyed the biggest threat? I don't think they are. I think that we get to see that they are moving slowly but surely. They are pushing people out of the north. If people get in the way, they get destroyed, they get killed, but they are just moving south. That seems to imply that whatever it is that they're wanting to do, they have not achieved it yet. So I don't think that they think that Waymar Royce was an important, significant person and that they've now achieved a great victory. I think that they're still pushing forward. When you look at their strategy, such as we can tell, it seems to be to be pushing south, gathering their army as they go, and they've left a guard on some important places like Bloodraven's Cave, where they appear not to be able to get in, but they left a guard around the outside it, and they have been deliberately trying to pick off and kill the leadership of the Night's Watch. That's what happened so Waymar Royce, I'll talk about that in a lot more but in a moment, but at a very basic level, he was the senior member of that group, and they targeted killing him. They made sure that they killed him personally. One of the other guys managed to get away, but they cared about killing Waymar Royce. The 2 dead wights, or the wights, who were brought south into Castle Black, they attacked, firstly, we know, Jeor Mormont. This was a targeted assassination attempt on the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. The other one seems to have gone for Jeremy Viker, who was also part of the leadership team of the Night's Watch. And we know that Benjen Stark, who was the first Ranger, another member of the leadership team, his party, which went north of the wall, was attacked because the 2 others, or the 2 wights who were brought down into Castle Black, were members of his group that went north. So they had been attacked. They were also trying to get Benjen Stark. So we've got 4 different instances of them targeting the leadership of the Night's Watch. This is clearly something that they are attempting to do. So that said, what's going on in this prologue? Now, one of the things that I would highly recommend you check out, because I think at least one of these questions is based on it, is a theory which was put forward by, I don't know whether he came up with it first, but certainly it's where I first saw it, and I think where most people associate it with Joe Magician, who has been on this channel a few times. Matt, excellent theoretician about A Song of Ice and Fire. He has a lot of theories which come, and I know he wouldn't mind me saying this, which come from slightly different angles to other people, but they're always based in a real detailed study of the book itself. So we have to take serious what this is. And his theory is that what was going on there was that they were looking for a Stark with a Valyrian steel sword, laid a trap for him, and when they realized that he wasn't a Stark with a Valyrian steel sword, that's when they started laughing and killing him. And that is because they must be looking for, they must have heard a rumor, they must have, maybe they're through their own greensight equivalent, they've picked up on what's going on down south, and they know Bloodraven is actively trying to get Jon to be in a position he thinks that he's Azor Ahai, so maybe they're looking out for that. But this was an active trap to try and get a Stark with a Valyrian steel sword. Is it possible? I think it's possible. But if you look at the way that scene is structured, the laughing doesn't come when you get the sword shattering, which is what a number of other people have sort of implied, that this is this is all about the Valyrian steel sword. They do look at the sword. The one main other, when Waymar Royce draws his sword and he's sort of holding it up, there is a pause. I don't know. I did try and get the quote up. Let me see if I can find it. Yes, here we go. We've got the other halted. This is when Waymar Royce draws his sword. Dance with me. He lifted his sword high over his head, defiant. The other halted. Will saw its eyes, blue, deeper and bluer than any human eyes, a blue that burned like ice. They fixed on the longsword, trembling on high, watched the moonlight running cold along the metal. For a heartbeat, he dared to hope. Then, basically, what happens is that the other attacks him anyway, and he parries a few times, and eventually he sort of gets cut, and he bleeds, and that's the point at which they laugh. We get him. They're all waiting. The others are waiting. The other others behind him, to right, to left, all around him. The watchers stood patient, faceless, silent, the shifting patterns of their delicate armor making them all but invisible, but they made no move to interfere. But then Royce's parry came a beat too late. The pale sword bit through the ringmail beneath his arm. The young lord cried out in pain, blood welled between the rings. Then the other said something in a language that Will did not know. His voice was like the cracking of ice on a winter lake, and the words were mocking. Then he tries to attack. The other parries, his sword shatters, and at that point they all bundle in. So that is the structure of it. So he fights him. The other fights Waymar Royce. He realizes that he can beat Waymar Royce quite easily. He mocks him. The others laugh at this mocking. He then destroys the sword, and they all finish him off. Could that be interpreted as focused, looking for a Stark and looking for Valyrian steel? It could. Waymar Royce is described a couple of times as having grey eyes, which is the Stark look. And he's mentioned his physique seems a bit like Jon's, for quite Starkish. So it's possible. But does it have to be that? It doesn't. It could just be them being wary of a possible Valyrian steel sword. Of course, they're wary of Valyrian steel swords. They know what they can do. Or if not a Valyrian steel sword, maybe they're looking for Lightbringer just to see what that looks like. But they don't seem to be deliberately doing anything. Once they decide that they can kill him, they do, and there's nothing else that sort of follows on from that. So is it possible that they're looking for Jon? It's possible, but I don't think it's an open shut case myself. Let's go to a question from Ultraviolence. Did the others leave Will alive on purpose? It seems they never leave survivors and could have probably killed him easily. It seems like a disadvantage for people to know they are active. Yeah, so this is quite interesting because they seem quite relaxed about him, whether he survives or not, because he's just that he knows he's a competent person is something that we do not know. Whether they allowed him to survive, that's never said. We might think of Will and Garrett as just being random members of the Night's Watch, but they're not. They're very good as anyone on the Night's Watch, was what J. Elmore once said. If anyone could evade the others and get back to the wall, it was him. He knew that he'd been working for decades in that part of the world. He knew where he was. He knew how to get there. He knew how to survive. If anyone could, he could. So it's possible that he did just get out. We certainly don't have a scene where they sort of stand there and sort of like go, well, there you go, you can head off. That doesn't happen. So it's possible that he did just evade them. If otherwise, though, they're okay about the wildlings knowing that they're moving. That's absolutely fine. They showed themselves to the wildlings when the wildlings were heading down towards the wall without really attacking them. So they aren't too bothered about people, the Night's Watch and south of the wall, knowing that they exist. That is absolutely fine for them. I think that we have to try and get into their mindset a bit, having said earlier that it's a mindset that we cannot truly understand because they are different. But if we get into their mindset, what are humans? Yes, they're people who will try and attack them. They have to be wary of them because maybe they will have some weapon which could actually damage them. But once they kill them, and they can relatively easily, we saw that with Waymar Royce, who will have been trained. Yes, he doesn't come across very well, but he will have been trained as a proper fighter. He wasn't a complete noob. He was actually quite good with his sword. They can kill humans quite easily and then get them onto their side. So what are humans? They're not just the opponents, they're future members of their own team, so they can just allow them to go. That's not a problem at all. And I think they're probably aware of their own legend. That's fine. If people go away saying the others are coming, what do they care? Are people going to believe them? Does it matter? I'm in two minds as to whether that first instance was just Will is a good ranger or they don't care. Probably it was a combination of both. Roman Lakovets saying, sorry if it's a repeat question, but why have we seen so little of the others despite being near to the end of the story? I genuinely don't think we're near the end of the story. I think that's the answer to this is, and when I mean that is these books are getting bigger. And this is part of the reason why The Winds of Winter is taking so long, is the books are getting bigger. And by that, I mean that I can't remember the exact size of the different stories, but the chapters are getting longer. The size of the books are all getting bigger, and this next book will be even more massive. One thing which is noticeable in that letter that George R. R. Martin wrote to his agent when he was pitching the idea originally was that this was going to be a trilogy, and he saw this as a trilogy where the first book was going to be focused on the Civil War, the Stark-Lannister Civil War. The second book was going to be focused on Dany's invasion of Westeros. The third book was going to be focused on the Others' invasion. That was how he was planning on doing it originally. We don't know. Obviously, lots of things have changed since then. But if you take that original structure, and a lot of what he was talking about with his original structure, the characters, the way that he told the story, all of these things have stayed exactly the same. If you take that structure and you say, where are we at in this original 3-book plan? You have to say probably about the end of book 1, because Dany's invasion was what was going to be happening in the 2nd book, the middle book, and we're nowhere near that yet. That has not happened yet. So in the story, so we're a long way away. And if you take this as an analysis of how the story is, the way that George R. R. Martin is having to write it is that it starts off very small in scope and scale. All stories do. They don't start off with telling us a million different characters. This starts off very small and focused. We get the people at Winterfell. The key characters largely are all in Winterfell to start with King Robert and the Lannisters having come up there. Then it starts expanding out. Characters move to different places, and we get to see Dany, we get to see what's happening in King's Landing, we're going north of the Wall, etc., etc. Where we are now in this story is the moment that has concertinaed out to probably the biggest it is going to be in terms of the different storylines we've got going on. The next book is about squishing everything back down in again to get to the finals book, which in the original plan was when everything starts tying back in together, rounding off all the loose ends from all the different stories. And when I say this next book is about squishing everything back in together, we've had all of these other different random storylines going on. We've had Victarion's storyline of heading across in a boat. We've got Dany who's headed off into the middle of the Dothraki Sea. Tyrion who's been on his long journey across Essos. Sir Barristan who's been staying there in Meereen. Just in that one theatre, I think most people would expect all of those characters to come back in and concentrate themselves back in on Meereen. Dany, she's going to be dealing with the Dothraki, but what happens after that? She's going to go back to Meereen. Victarion, in the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, arrives at Meereen. So Barristan's there already. Tyrion in the pre-release chapters of the Winds of Winter is outside Meereen and is surely going to go in. So those characters are going to concertina in. Then all of them this will be Dany's aim, surely, in the next book, will be to go to Westeros. So she's going to be heading off westwards with all of that lot. Similarly, Arya at some point is going to escape from the Faceless Men. She's going to be going back to Westeros. All of these different stories are going to start concertinaing back in. We are at the widest part of this story. So if, without depressing anyone too much, if I had to be pressed on how far into this story we are, regardless of which number book we're at in this alleged seven-part series, I would say we're halfway. That's where I think we're at. And I think the last 2 books in terms of length are going to be about as big as the first 5 books put together. That's my general take. Which brings me back to, again, another huge digression. Apologies. But that brings me back to the original question, which was, why have we seen so little of the others despite being near the end of the story? I don't think we're near the end of the story. I think we're halfway through the story. And the original, just got a little hair in my mouth. The original idea was that they would be the end baddies, the final boss. That was what, so we weren't going to see them to the end. So they were being held back deliberately. So that's why we've seen so little of them. And the threat, the last thing I will say on this one, is that the threat of the others is greater in our minds for us not knowing what's going on. If we'd met them lots and we've heard what they're talking about and we understand what their motivations are and we've seen how many of them there are, suddenly actually the threat becomes a lot more manageable in our minds. It's when we do not understand the threat from the others that they are scary, and that is what they are supposed to be, scary. So that's why we haven't seen much of them, because they're being held deliberately back and we're not as far through the story as we might otherwise think. The Drew, thank you very much. I think that was a super chat. If there was a question, I didn't see a question attached to that, but if there was one, please do let one of the moderators know and they'll pick it up. Sasuke saying, I've never heard concertina used as a verb, but I love it and will use it going forward. I don't know if it is a verb. Maybe I just made up a word. It's definitely a noun. It should be a verb. Let's start the campaign now. Andrew K saying, less is more with the others. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was saying. Couldn't agree more. David Thomas, I was showering as I listened to the Waymar Royce question. You said the other paused until they saw his blood. What was seen in the blood that resolved their tension? Thanks to you, loved the mods. Well, I'll read it to you. I think wherever possible, we'll go back to the text and actually read what it says. So then Royce's parry came a beat too late. The pale sword, that's the sword from the other, the pale sword bit through the ringmail beneath his arm. The young lord cried out in pain. Blood welled between the rings. It steamed in the cold, and the droplets seemed red as fire where they touched the snow. So Waymar's fingers brushed his side. His moleskin glove came away soaked with red. The other said something in a language that Will did not know. His voice was like the cracking of ice on a winter lake, and the words were mocking. So that was what caused the sort of the mocking words. Then the laughter comes just a bit later, after he then attacks the other parries. That parry breaks his sword. One of the shards blind Waymar, and at that point they all move forward together. And as they are stabbing him to death, he heard their voices and laughter, sharp as icicles. So that was that's what's going on. So when you say that what was seen in the blood that resolved their tension, it's more, I think, a matter of they saw that actually this person couldn't harm them. Maybe this is the first member of the Night's Watch that they have personally taken on for thousands of years. That's entirely possible. Members of the Night's Watch have disappeared, but maybe they were taken out by the wights, not the others. Maybe what we're seeing here is the first time that the others for thousands of years have encountered a human and fought them one-on-one. And if that's the case, then yes, they might be concerned about Dragonglass, Valyrian Steel, whatever. But also, if they are aware of the fact that they've been gone for thousands of years, they might be thinking, well, maybe the humans have learned some new tricks. Maybe they've improved their weapons. Maybe suddenly we aren't this preeminent force that we were back in the day. And it's at that moment that they realize that they still are. Humans have not advanced at all during that time, effectively. So that, again, it's a boring interpretation, the fact that they just haven't attacked humans for thousands of years and wanted to reassure themselves that they could do it. But it works just as well as any other, I think. Question from Eric. Do coming back as wights relate to proximity to an other at moment of death, or just proximity to any corpse? What about the wights at Castle Black? Well, we don't know the details of this in the books yet. The implication is that this is a wight who is a and other, which is controlling wights. So they, when they find a dead body, they can control it in the same way that Bran, if this is some sort of twisted version of what Bran can do with Warging, for example, then if he can see something, then he can warg into it, and maybe at some point he will get to the point where he can warg into a large number of things at the same time. So that is what we think is going on here. What about the wights at Castle Black? What seems to have happened, because this does appear a bit confusing on first read, is that they were turned into wights and then trudged all the way back to where they knew they were going to be found, then made to just lie down and act dead. Because they hoped that, because they knew who they were members of the Night's Watch. The gamble was that the members of the Night's Watch would take the bodies back. Having found these bodies, they would bring the bodies back into Castle Black, which they did. At that point, they just made them get up and do what they wanted to do. So it's basically they wanted them to play dead to get them transported through. The issue here, the complicated thing here, is the magical barrier of the wall, because this implies some things. It implies that you cannot use your other magic to get through the wall. They cannot sort of walk through there, but they have to be carried through by other people, by the Night's Watch. But the wall itself does not create a barrier to that control. Those are the implications that we have got here. And I think that there's a lot of work that we could go down. We could go down a very long perambulation on that one. Let's not do that this time. But what seems to happen was that they ambushed Benjen's party. At least 2 of them were killed. They were then resurrected as wights. The wights were then made to walk down to that grove of weirwood trees that they knew that every now and then the Night's Watch went to, and they just laid the trap from there, got them to play dead, which they were. So it's like it's an odd thing, getting dead people to play dead. Question from Lewis Southern. These are really good questions today, by the way, everyone. I'm really enjoying this. Lewis Southern, there is a tribe to the north, the Thens. Do you think that they have regular interactions with the others, and how different culturally? Yes, so the Thens are from right up in the sort of the far northwest, heading towards where the others are, or where they're from, certainly. Are they different? I would have to go and have a look to see what is said about them in something like The World of Ice and Fire about all of the differences. But one thing I would say, I can't remember if I've got any questions from my patrons on this, but I'll sort of start answering it now, because I think this is an interesting point, is why did the others return is the million-dollar question here. Why did they come back? And it's possible, just possible, that they were disturbed from their sleep. Now, we have, when I say sleep, that's the other million-dollar question, is what have they been doing for all those years? And I said at the beginning of this that I would highlight a couple of things from the TV show that I think are important for our book understanding what was going on. And the one thing that I would pick up on is the fact that George R. R. Martin wrote 4 episodes of the TV show, an episode in each of the first 4 seasons. Now, if you sort of cast your mind back to particularly season 1, that was very, very close to a like-for-like adaptation of the book 1. As far as George R. R. Martin was concerned at that point, forget everything that happened later, as far as George R. R. Martin was concerned, at that point, they were making a very, very close adaptation of his books. He wrote one episode. The episode was The Pointy End, which I think was episode 8. And in that, again, very faithful adaptation, as you would expect, of his own book, there is a reference to the White Walkers that is not in the books. This is where Sam, and this was written by George R. R. Martin, he wrote the episode, Sam talks to, I think it's John, and he says that he read in a book that the White Walkers sleep under the snow, or slept under the snow for thousands of years. Now, normally I would just say that's just like a throwaway line on the TV show, but this was a throwaway line that George R. R. Martin put in there. And so I think that has to be our best understanding of what happened to the others for all that time, that they slept under the snow. I mean, that's, I'm sure, poetic language, but they were in some sort of hibernation. Something roused them from it. What could have roused them from it? I will come back to a few different options later. I do have a question about this, but one of the options is that the wildlings were expanding. There were many more of them than there used to be. They disturbed them, and the ones, the Thens, those who are up in the far north would have been the ones who have done it. So it's possible, I'm not saying it's likely, but it's possible that that was what happened. That was what stirred them. Let's go to a question from David Waters. Do you think we'll see anything of the others in anything else George R. R. Martin is working on, e.g. Dunk and Egg? Oh, good. I say good because it's here, but I fear it won't be. In Dunk and Egg, we do know that the title of the next novella that he was working on, and so incidentally, for those who don't know, he'd part written the next Dunk and Egg story before putting it down, so we could have another Dunk and Egg story quite quickly. Do not be surprised if that an announcement about that happens at some point, I don't know, this year or something. I'm not going to, actually, I shouldn't put a timescale on it. Don't be surprised if Dunk and Egg happens quicker than you think it might. But that is going to be called the She-Wolves of Winterfell. So Dunk and Egg are going to head all the way north up to Winterfell. It would make sense that there might be at least some reference to the Night's Watch, some along the lines there. Maybe there'll be even a Dunk and Egg story where they go to the wall. That would be pretty impressive. Will we see the others there? Only by mention of them by legend and rumor would be my guess. Is there any moment when the others will be mentioned in Fire and Blood, the history of the Targaryens from after the dance of the Dragons up to the present day, so to speak, wherever he ends it, Robert's Rebellion or something, perhaps? No, there's nothing we know in the histories at the moment that tells us this. But that said, he is writing this from scratch. He can just drop in something, and he did quite a lot when doing Fire and Blood Part 1. He dropped in a huge amount of extra details, things that we didn't know happened. Balerion flying off to Valyria, that kind of thing. The Silverwing, Queen Alicent heading up to the wall, trying to fly north of the wall, that was dropped in. That kind of thing. So do not be surprised if there is some oblique reference here, but the focus is not there because he has already built in the backstory that the others, everybody just thinks that they're a myth from thousands of years ago. And if that is the case, then there can't be a confirmed sighting, mini invasion, anything like that. That kind of thing can't happen. There might be a little bit of something around the edges of the story, but nothing major can happen. DM Collins, thank you again, very kind. What if we pool our money? We could buy hundreds of rare Grateful Dead one-of-a-kind live bootleg tapes from the 70s and burn one every day with a flamethrower until he finishes the books. I'm loving your increasingly inventive ways of trying to blackmail George R.R. Martin into writing the books. He is writing the books. I'm sure he's writing the book. He's just writing things in different orders than what we may want him to. Yeah, I mean, I think if a Duncan Egg comes out, I will just be very, very happy. So yes, I definitely want to see the Winds of Winter, but if I get a Duncan Egg to keep me going, that will be good. Kaius Ballerina, do ice wights continue to decompose? Again, we don't have full confirmation of this. I think the answer is, in theory, they should, but ice preserves. This is a thing that we've been told many times, and I think that is, if they are in the presence of the others bring huge amounts of cold with them, and they will not. They'll effectively be frozen and therefore not decomposing. So no, I think is the short answer. In practice, even if in reality they may. That makes sense. Let's see, have I got any more questions in the chat? Andrew K saying She-Wolves was slated for release years ago for an anthology series, so I'm guessing it is very near completion. Yeah, I don't know whether it's. He hasn't said exactly where it is. She-Wolves of Winterfell. I don't think it's likely to be very near completion, because if he was just a few pages away, I suspect he probably would have finished it off. But maybe he's like halfway through, something like that, and they are short, the Duncan Egg stories. So yeah, give me a Duncan Egg story. I'll be a happy little geek. Let's go with a question from Mara Lee. Hi there, Mara. Saying, on the TV show, the Night King was the leader of the White Walkers. Do you think we will read about an equivalent leader in the books? This is really interesting because we haven't got much of a clue on this. We do have what appears to be somebody in that prologue who is set apart, is different, is the person who is doing the one-on-one fighting with Waymar Royce. Is he their leader? He certainly seems to have something of a leadership role in that chapter. But beyond that, are we going to see an overall leader? Maybe the Night's King is the it's what George R.R. Martin's conceptualization is different to the Night King. The Night's King was a member of the Night's Watch, and that would then make him, if he survived to today, not an other. If he's killed and raised again, he would be a wight. The other was the Night's Queen. So and that is the only other sort of leader type person we have seen from the others. So if I were to say, is there a leader that we're going to see, then I think from what we've seen so far, either that person we have already seen in the prologue or the Night's Queen. But there doesn't have to be. There doesn't have to be. The way that the TV show, the reason why they introduced this character is so that we had somebody to focus in on. It's not just lots of random baddies who all look very similar. We've got somebody to focus in on. They did this on lots of different armies so that we had the Unsullied weren't just lots of Unsullied. We had Grey Worm, who they brought to the fore. Grey Worm exists in the books, but he is a much bigger character was a bigger character on the TV show. Similarly, they would do the same with the Dothraki. They brought forward a person as the leader of the Dothraki later on, so that we could see a leader person. They liked doing that, and it's a perfectly normal human thing to to focus in on a person rather than a whole mass of unidentifiable people. Kaius Ballerina saying, when the white mists rise up, how do you fight a mist crow? Shadow with teeth. Can your sword cut cold? Poetic language from Tormund. Or can the others shapeshift or become mist and shadow? I'd have to go through the details of the context of all of that. But the idea is... not that they're missed so much, but their armor. And I've got a question about the armor somewhere, so I'll wrap that up from one of my patrons. I'll wrap that up here, because again, we've got some mention of the armor. This is a quote from a guy called Tommy Patterson, who was an artist that George R. R. Martin was talking to and described the others. And apparently George R. R. Martin said that, this is a quote, the reflective camouflaging armor is able to pick up the images of the things around it like a clear, still pond. And that, if you go back to what we had in the prologue, then we find that they are... silent the shifting patterns of their delicate armor, making them all but invisible in the wood. This is what George R. R. Martin describes them as being, almost invisible. So that's the feel we've got when we have shadows with teeth, a mist. We have the mist, the cold mist appears, and then something comes out of the dark. That's the feel we've got here. Does this mean that they're shapeshifters? No, not necessarily. It does mean that they have got armor that makes them near invisible in the dark. So I think that's what it is. I'm not saying that they can't be shapeshifters, but their armor appears to be much better than human armor. Reflective Rambling saying, it would be interesting if they could change into mist or shadow and not cross water. It would be another Dracula mythos connection. Yeah, absolutely. That's so the Dracula mythos thing is very close to that. But we don't get, when we get the stories told of them, the legends told of them, I think we would have that as a key part of it. This, if they came at us and then they turned into mist and they appeared behind us and hit it, that kind of thing. No, that doesn't appear in those stories, and I think it probably would. Sylvia Galasso saying, ciao, Robert, ciao. Why do you think their eyes are blue? Is it because they are filled with extreme cold? The blue eyes... partly it's a thing to make them stand out. It's a thing to make us remember them by. It's just a simple literary technique. Secondly, George R. R. Martin went heavy on eye color in book one. He kind of wound back a bit on it later, but in book one, there's a huge thing about eye colors. We get the constant references to what the eye color of the Starks are, to the Valyrian eye color. What about the eye color of Baratheon children? Here we have the very blue eyes of the others. This is Tyrion's eyes are mentioned. The eye color is a big theme here, and blue is because this is a cold color, and it is up against red. Red is the color which is very clearly where Dany is coming from, so that is what he's setting up. I talked about this when I did the review of book one with Aziz a couple of weeks ago. We had book one is structured so that it's bookmarked by, at the beginning we get the others, at the end we get the dragons. This is a song of ice and fire, and we're being introduced to both ice and fire at either end of this book. The prologue, we get the others, and then the last chapter, effectively the epilogue, we get the dragons. So that's why it is they're to stand out and to sort of thematically make them stand out from other people, as well as having that kind of icy cold blue there. But thematically, it's a blue that burns. So this is a fiery cold. Sylvia Galasso do you think there may be other female and any other female character? I can only think about the one from the Night's Watch legend, the Corpse Queen. Yeah, it's possible. It's very possible. Again, this is one of those things where our lack of understanding of their culture comes in, because we simply do not know. Do they live forever? Do they multiply? What's going on? Could there be female others? Of course there could. We just haven't seen them. We've only seen a handful of others. And it's worth pointing out that you can have a whole fantasy epics like The Lord of the Rings where you never knowingly see a female dwarf. And it's entirely, I mean, Tolkien didn't have huge amounts of female characters in the main Lord of the Rings, but the principle is clear, is that if the structure of the society is such that the people who go out to war are male, and then the people who stay at home are female, if that's the societal structure that you've got, which broadly speaking it was with the dwarves in the Lord of the Rings, maybe that's what the structure here is for the others. Maybe if you did go to the Heart of Winter, then you would find lots of female others. We do not know this at all. Vance saying, hello Robert, in your opinion, was there a singular event that triggered the re-emergence of the others? Well, I sort of trailed this a little bit earlier, giving the boring answer that it's possible that they just got roused from their sleep by some wildlings. It is possible. It's a boring answer, but it is possible. The next interesting answer, I think, is you go and work out how long have they been around for, which we can sort of do, because we know that Craster seems to have been giving up his sons for most of his adult life. As far as we can tell, based on how old he seems to be, how old his wives are, and the fact that they've got children who have also grown to an age where they can have children, this seems to imply this is 30, maybe 40 years that's been going on for, which means that they have been around for at least that long, but remaining in the shadows. If you go back that sort of period of time, is there anything that happens in Westeros, or indeed Essos, that might trigger it? Well, some people have suggested, could it be the birth of someone like Jon Snow or Daenerys Targaryen? No, because they seem to have been doing things before that. The only thing which possibly fits the bill is the tragedy at Summerhall, which, I mean, I love the idea because it just ties everything together. I can't see that it would do. It doesn't seem to be a thing which might work, but the timing is quite coincidental that it's roughly there. So that's possible. The other thing, which is probably more likely, is simply that this is one of those, this is when the time was right for them to return, when the magical omens were right. The comets are in the sky. The dragons are about to return. When Azor Ahai Reborn is about to happen, that is the right time for them to return. So that is probably what we've got going on. It's a slightly more airy-fairy fantasy answer, but it's probably most likely. If there is an event, I'd love it to be Summerhall. I can't see the evidence that it is, but I would love it to be Summerhall. Let's have a quick look in the chat just to make sure I've not missed anything. Oh, Jewel Elson, thank you very much for the super sticker. That's very kind. Let's go to a question from Patreon, Howland's little sister, saying happy St. Patrick's Day, Robert, and happy St. Patrick's Day to you and anyone who's watching this live who is celebrating. I hope you have a fantastic time. After all the time that has passed from the publication of the books and the TV show, please refresh our memories as to what precisely is known about the others as told to us in the books. I think that part of it I've sort of been covering, and I've got a couple more questions which will sort of round off the rest of that. But then you say, what do the maesters know? Is what the maesters tell the population different from their perceived knowledge within the citadel? Is there any knowledge of the others at the wall that is unknown to the rest of the Seven Kingdoms? What do the Starks know about them? So what do the Starks... I think these are all incredibly valid questions of who knows what. What do the Starks know? Not much. The Starks have forgotten. The North does not remember. So the institutional memory has gone there. What we have left is the oral tradition, old man stories. That's what we have in terms of the knowledge that the Starks have, and that is more than the knowledge that they have elsewhere, although some of the stories seem to have survived for someone like Sam Tarly to have heard them. So that's what's going on there. What about at the wall? Well, the main incident that we know with the Night's Watch, the whole incident of the Night's King and his corpse bride, all of that records seem to have been destroyed. It's almost as if they're saying this didn't happen. Just get rid of it. We're not even going to remember the name of who this person was. We'd just scrap it. So there's not much there. Sam goes and has a look in the library at the wall and can't find much. So there's not much there. So is there knowledge in the Night's Watch? Well, again, institutional knowledge. They take these things slightly more seriously than others do, but no, there's not huge amounts there. The only place really in Westeros that might have the information that's not the Children of the Forest is Old Town, because they will have lots of bits of research from people from all over the place. They, however, have come to the conclusion that the others are a myth and legend and are not coming back. So there will probably be some ancient manuscripts, and what will be fascinating, don't know how long Sam's going to have in Old Town, but what will be fascinating is, can he then go in and discover stuff while he is down there? Because he is one of the main people who will give us the information we need to know about how to end the threat of the others. But I name-checked the Children of the Forest, and this is where the real knowledge is. The Children of the Forest will have this memory through the Weirwood Network, and I think that we will see something equivalent to Bran seeing the creation of the others. It won't be the same, I'm sure, as what happened on the TV show, but there will be something along those lines where he gets to understand the backstory a little bit more. That is where we're going to get this information. Bran is the person who will know and understand, and George R. R. Martin is using Bran very sparingly, quite rightly, because he will have so much information he cannot give too much away, but the amount of chapters he gets per book is really quite low at the moment, and it's probably going to stay low and maybe even get lower the further in we get. We will learn a bit about the others through him, though. Let's look back in the chat. Had a question from two questions, I think. First one from Sarah Awesome Sauce, saying, I've been a bit of a dunce at coming up with intriguing questions for you. don't worry. You don't, no pressure to come up with questions. So we'll just say hello and hope you're doing well this fine Thursday. P.S. I hope we see giant ice spiders big as hounds. Well, hello back to you, Sarah. And I am doing very well this fine Thursday. I'm hoping we see giant ice spiders big as hounds. Yeah, absolutely. I talked about them a little bit earlier. I think it's a free win for George R. R. Martin to include these. They're in the legends, they're in the stories. The fans love the idea of them. Why not? He can include them without there being any problem whatsoever. David Waters saying, thanks for your last reply. I love your tinfoil theory videos. What's your favorite tinfoil theory about the others? Tinfoil theory. I don't know if I have many tinfoil theories about the others, because it's almost like we don't know enough about them to have tinfoil theories. It is good tinfoil theories come from when there are, in my view anyway, when there's enough evidence to suggest a thing. If the closest that we can come to a tinfoil theory, and I don't think this is necessarily right, but is this idea that the others were not created so much as brought in from another dimension, which would add to. I mean, George R. R. Martin is a sci-fi writer as well as a fantasy writer, and there's no reason why they have to have been created. I love this idea that we have this kind of rift world idea that they can come through from another place, and it does fit the idea of the She, who have their own dimension effectively in a lot of these different sort of ancient stories. It's the She don't just live in our worlds, just a long way away. They live in their own world, their own dimension, and then come into ours to steal our children or whatever. So I love that idea that maybe they're not just sitting at the North Pole, but they're from a completely different place altogether. Andrew K saying, if the others have some sort of weirwood access, perhaps they are aware of the Children of the Forest or Bloodraven's eugenics play towards a savior figure is close to fruition and cause the reactivation. Yeah, I mean, this is, I probably should have said it a bit earlier, but I agree. But this is building on my my sort of play. If you've not read those videos, watch those videos about Bloodraven's work. Bloodraven has been working, it would appear, for many, many decades to try and bring about the prince that was promised, Azor Ahai Reborn. And if the others can access into his plans in some way through their magical powers, they can see that Bloodraven is trying to do this. And Bloodraven, from the perspective of the others, is probably quite a huge threat, because not only was he Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, not only has he got magical powers that are linked across to the Targaryens and fire, but also he is now hooked up to the Weirwood network. So he's got the whole Children of the Forest vibe going on. He is actually a serious threat for them. So if they can see into that, then that would provide a reason for them starting to move. C-Star saying, I really appreciate what you do, Robert. Oh, thank you. Keep it up. Off the topic, if Bran died and was resurrected by a red priest, would he be able to walk again? I don't know. I wish it were an easier subject. We do not know, in terms of being resurrected by a red priest, that would turn him into a fire wight, and the only two confirmed fire wights that we have that we can draw some conclusions from are Beric and Lady Stoneheart. Now, if we take that as our basis for understanding how that works, when they came back, they were not healed up of whatever physical ailments they had before. The classic example there, obviously, is Lady Stoneheart. She had, her throat was cut, her vocal cords were cut, and so when she comes as Cat, when she comes back as Lady Stoneheart, she can only just create this kind of rasping, croaking voice, which is barely understandable. So I think the answer to that is no. Coming back as a fire wight does not regenerate you and give you things that you previously did not have physically. It will, if anything, you come back as less of a person than you were before. Klaus Ballerina, picking up, thank you very much, picking up for Chad Bailey. None of Danny's visions seem to address the others. Is it possible that she's not intended to be part of the solution? Well, we do have a dream of her sort of flying across to the Trident. That does sort of seem to hint at some sort of others action, but no, I would agree that the short answer is that her dragon dreams don't generally take her in that direction. What we do have, though, are people who are on her side, whether she knows it or not, who see her as part of this solution. The classic example here are the Red Priests. So Melisandre, we have to always remember, she is a rogue priest. She has gone away from what the main teaching is of the Red Priests of R'hllor, not in terms of the key tenets, but in terms of who she thinks Azor Ahai Reborn is. She went out and decided this was Stannis. But the church as a whole, Benaro, Makoro, they believe this is Dany. They are going to be throwing, and let's not forget, for the Church of R'hllor, this is Armageddon. That's how they view it. This is the fundamental battle between good and evil. This is their god against the bad, evil god, the great other, and their champion is going to be Dany. So the visions and things that she gets come from a variety of places, but the Quaithe does a lot of them, and Quaithe's agenda seems to be getting to her to be a Targaryen, to be launching an invasion. That's where she's coming from. I suspect she may be also think that she is Azor Ahai Reborn, but that's a bit more speculative. The main thing here is that there are people who believe that she is Azor Ahai, Dany is Azor Ahai Reborn, including the most powerful church in the entire world of Planetos. Let's go with Lawnduck20 saying, I've always been fascinated with the arms and armor of the others. How do you think they are made? Well, I covered the armor a little bit ago. But just in terms of the swords, again, we've got a quote from George R. R. Martin. He has told us things a long time ago, and he was asked what substance the swords of the others are made from, and he says ice, but not like regular ice. The others can do things with ice that we can't imagine and make substances of it. So that's what we are looking at, is them forging things out of ice and making them magical. That's what it is. We've got magical ice, that's strengthened ice. If you look at, for example, what happened in that battle with Waymar Royce, that's not ordinary. This is a steel sword clashing against one of the other swords, and it was Waymar Royce's sword that broke. So this is not, I think when we say ice, we need to get out of our mind our kind of ice. This is a magical type of ice. And it would appear that they have enough of a culture, enough of a civilization to know how to manufacture these things, which adds extra layers of questions. Where and how do they do this? They have armor. They must make armor somehow. Do they? If we go back to their home base, are we going to find blacksmiths? Are we going to find armorers? Are we going to find a thriving civilization? presumably at least some of that. Is that what Bran saw when he went to the Heart of Winter? He was scared, having seen it and coming back. Surely the thing that he was scared of was not just the others, but the others with an intent to invade. So is that what he saw? Is that he saw the equivalent of the others' war machine being geared up? It's possible, but the short answer is ice, magical ice, that is stronger than steel. And I think of it as being a bit. George R. R. Martin does like to sort of mirror, a bit like the Valyrian steel, but made from ice instead. So it's that kind of idea. It's spells, magic are a part of this, and it's ice rather than what was probably dragon fire. 26 Art Girl saying, I would like to know more about their language as depicted in the first book. So you've had the only real description of their language that we've got, which is like ice breaking on a frozen lake, and then their laughter like icicles. The fun fact was that the guy who made or came up with the languages, the Dothraki language, Valyrian, guy called David Peterson, very talented. He was also commissioned for the TV show to come up with this language of the White Walkers. Scroth was the name that we've got. And he did, or at least he made a start on it and had enough to be using in season 1. But then they made the decision that they weren't going to actually do that. I think it was probably a good decision for the TV show. When you get them chatting away to each other, then it would have taken away a little bit of the fear factor, I think. But that's what we've got. So they have got a language. It doesn't sound human, but it is understandable in tone. I think that's the other thing that we can draw out from this, is that the way that the other was talking to his companions was mocking. That was what we're told. And so clearly, although this is from a very different starting point in terms of a language, it has this feel. And so that although the others are inhuman, different to us, a way of the ununderstandable, then this as a language that has an element of it that is understandable to us. So there is a link across to us there, or us, humanity. But generally speaking, we can't understand the words. Humans cannot understand the words. Reflective Rambling, thank you. Picking up for Mark Shisa, saying, last time Azor Ahai did not truly defeat the others, only delayed them. I wonder why it should be different at the current events. The curious thing about the legend of Azor Ahai is that we don't know what Azor Ahai did. We have this hugely long discussion about how he forged Lightbringer, and then we just get told that he went off and won the battle and saved the day. We don't know how. What did he do? Did he thrust it into the heart of the others? Did he kill enough of them that they ran away? We just don't actually have that information. So, yeah, it's an odd one, because we don't know what happened. The implication, if we're to take what George R. R. Martin wrote in for Sam to say on the TV show as semi-canon, which I think we can probably do, and they have been doing the equivalent of hibernating, then that implies that they were beaten back but not defeated. So the magic that created them or brought them in has not been undone. That's shown by the fact that the seasons are still out of balance. So what seems to have happened is that there was a agreement between the children of the forest and humanity to work together. The last hero, this is the Northerners, the first men's history of what happened. He went out, found the children of the forest, and then they together managed to end the long night. This does seem to imply a battle. They had the weapons that they needed, because from that point onwards, the children of the forest supplied the Night's Watch with dragon glass. That was the weak spot for the others, which incidentally, this is another bit of evidence for there being a history between the children of the forest and the others. The children of the forest knew what their weakness was. They provided that then to the Night's Watch, and the other weapon obviously is Lightbringer. So they learned the weapons that they needed to do and then pushed them back, and it's almost as if we feel that the others retreated, and then in order that this is the again Occam's razor version of this is that the others retreated in the face of superior weaponry, and then they hibernated for a long time. So when they come back, this explains that Waymar Royce moment when they pause, they stare at the blade. If they had previously been pushed back by superior weaponry, suddenly this was the moment, this was the important thing. Is this superior weaponry now everywhere, or is it just, has that now been forgotten? And it appears that it had been forgotten. Let's go to a question from DM Collins. Thank you very much. Saying, everyone assumes Bloodraven wants to defeat the others, but could he now be in league with them? A Blood Saruman. Perhaps he is rooting out possible Azor Ahais just to murder them in their cribs. Okay, I think not myself. So he is seemingly training up Bran how to become a tree wizard, and he is seemingly making sure that Jon stays at the wall and making sure that the Night's Watch have access to the tools that they need to defend themselves. So if you buy into the theory, as I do, that Ghost is being walked into by Bloodraven, the colouring is one thing. There are many other clues here, but if you buy into that theory, then you see, what does Ghost do? Well, Ghost prevents Jon from escaping the Night's Watch. He's the person who gives away his position to his friends. He's the person who finds the dead bodies of the two wights. He's the person who then manages to rouse Jon to save the day to kill the wight that was trying to attack Jael Mormont. Ghost is the one who finds that cache of dragon glass and also probably the Horn of Winter. It's like Jon is being kept at the wall and is being given the tools he needs to be leading the fight against the others. If that is Bloodraven doing that, then that is in line with everything that he's been doing so far. I don't see any evidence of him, as you say it, murdering possible Azor Ahais in their cribs. He killed a lot of members of the extended Targaryen family, but he seems to have made a point of trying to ensure that one branch of it survived and was in power. Let's go to a question from Mara Lee saying, on the show, Benjen's character became an amalgam of himself and Cold Hands. Do you think the reason why we haven't seen his return to the wall in the books is his character shared a similar fate? Did he become a wight? Do you think he was killed by the others? There are two characters I would like to see, and that is Benjen and Howland Reed. Do you have any new insights since re-listening to the books, or do you feel about the same? Well, I did a video about Benjen 6 months ago, so if you want my full thoughts on what has happened to Benjen, do go there. Benjen, we know some things, actually a lot more than we probably first think, about what happened to him after he headed out. So he headed out, went northwest. He seems to have, and he was looking for Waymar Royce. That's the first thing he was doing. He was looking for Waymar Royce and what happened there. He seems to have followed his tracks up to Craster's keep. He doesn't go in. He doesn't meet Craster. He doesn't need to, because he can see that those Waymar Royce and the other two went on from there. He will have followed them. Surely he will have figured out something of what happened in that confrontation. At some point, his group got attacked. At least two of them were killed and were turned into wights. Those were the two Othor and Jafer Flowers. Those were the two who then went back to the wall. So what happened to him after that? Well, he seems to have survived. He seems to have then, and we know this because he leaves marks for other rangers who are following. He's got flash marks in tree trunks so people know which way that he's gone. And he heads northwest, and the trail ends as he's going up into the sort of the mountains beyond the haunted forest. And so that's as far as we know. And from the trajectory, it looks like he's gone north. He's seen what happened to Waymar Royce and co. He's experienced an attack from the wights, and he's decided, well, I could go back now, or I could just follow this all the way. Somebody at some point has to understand what's going on, and he just plows on, heading northwest, heading towards the heart of winter. That is what seems to have happened. Did he make it there? We don't know. The fact that he's not sent back any message doesn't seem very good. The fact that he stopped leaving marks doesn't seem very good. So there's a fair chance that, he might have been killed. But he could come back. It's entirely possible. And if he comes back, it's because he has gone and he has seen something and he's returning. I don't think that he's going to go off and come back without any extra information. Lambert saying, my first super chat question was not answered. I do apologize if I missed that one. Very sorry about that. How do you think the others will get defeated? When they hibernate, does that cause the long summer season? Okay, so when they hibernate, the hibernate thing, if we're going from this line that George R. R. Martin put into the show, then that was hibernating for thousands of years, not bringing a long summer season. The long summers are just a part of the seasons being out of balance. Sometimes there's short summers, sometimes there's long summers. A long summer often means a long winter to follow, but not always. How do you think the others will get defeated? I think I did actually. Might not have been directly to your super chat, but I did cover this a bit earlier in the stream. I don't think this is going to be a fight. I don't think this is going to be a battle. I think this is a matter of undoing the magic that created the others in the first place, in whatever the way that was, or brought them in, or made them happen. So that is the way that this needs to be. And I think that the children of the forest are involved in this. I think that the fact that the others they have weaknesses which match up, correlate so exactly to what the children of the forest would need their weaknesses to be. I think that they are very much children of the forest, creations of some kind. How will they get defeated? By the children of the forest undoing the magic that created them. Why haven't they done that already? Well, perhaps until this point they didn't think they needed to, because the others had disappeared, and now perhaps there just aren't enough of them left because so many of them have died. So that's entirely possible, and what they need is a very powerful magic person who can do this. Perhaps this is where Bran comes in. I don't know. the possibility that several of us during season 8 speculated on. I still like the idea. I can remember Smokescreen did a whole video on this as well. Was the idea that they were inextricably linked, and I saw somebody asking a question in the chat earlier about the link to the Isle of Faces. If the magic that created them was at the Isle of Faces, perhaps the Isle of Faces needs to burn in order for that magic to be undone. There are various reasons why you might think that that's the case, but it seems sort of right that the Isle of Faces seems to be there to remember things. That's the whole point of it. It's there as a sort of the central database, and it seems the most logical place for them to be performing their huge amounts of magic. Okay, let's go to a question from. Let's have a look. I've got 3 more questions. So now is a good time to drop some more questions in the chat if you would like. 444 says, do you think that the others can be something else than big baddies? Just the force that we don't understand, which have their own goals with different moral code. Like maybe killing people isn't the aim, but just the means to fight the force they understand as big baddies. I've always suspected that Creepy Trees and Bloodraven are big baddies on the war with all other life. If the others are descendants of the Night's King, who I believe could be a Stark, maybe they are looking for Jon to become their messiah, a prince that was promised to fight their cause. Yeah, I've heard this theory a few times. I don't personally buy into it, the idea that they see Jon as being their messiah. I think it makes more sense that they see Jon as being their possible nemesis, because their messiah surely would come from themselves, not from some people who are trying to kill them. But will we see them as something else other than big baddies? I think almost certainly we will. I think that we will understand, if not the detail of why they're doing everything that they're doing, but I think that we will understand a little bit more about how they were wronged. And I think they probably were wronged. If the Children of the Forest did make them from humans initially and just cut them off from their friends and family, turned them into a completely different form of life, if this is what happened, which is possible, and made them be able to have powers, but just to animate dead things, maybe, and be isolated away from everyone else forever, that's pretty horrible. And I understand that might lead them to be slightly vengeful. So perhaps we could understand that. That was a slight bit of understatement there. But what we do see is that they aren't just random killers. We talked a little bit earlier about the fact, or speculated, did Will escape in the prologue because he was a very good ranger, or did he escape because they allowed him to escape? Certainly, when you look at what they are doing in the north, they seem not just to be randomly trying to kill everybody all the time. They seem to be a lot more restrained about that. They also have this ever the artists, as Mance Raider calls them, because they arrange corpses in patterns as if they're like, maybe this is actually art. They're not just trying to send messages to people. So are we going to understand? Are they just going to be the big baddies? No, they're not just going to be the big baddies. Are we going to understand everything about why they're doing what they're doing? Probably not everything. But I think that we're going to come to an understanding that they're not just here randomly killing humans because they like killing humans. I think they see their enemies as the children of the forest, and it happens that humans are there. And humans can get in the way, and they're trying to achieve something. I think that their objective is not just killing everything in sight. It's a lot more nuanced than that. Question from Catherine Furseth saying, "Hi Robert, could you please talk about the otherness of the others, both in real terms of being non-human, which we already have in the Children of the Forest as well as giants, but also in symbolic terms. George R. R. Martin has created a fun and poignant switch of black and white as symbols of good and evil in his books. Can you please elaborate on how you view that switch as a literary tool in the work? Also, have to ask, at this point, what is your best guess as to what the others want? Thanks as always." Well, there's a lot of different questions in there. In terms of the non-humans, I think that the important thing is that it's not just that they're non-humans. They are a completely different type of life. So it's not just we've got different intelligent races who all have to share this one planet. This is a completely different type of life. Different. It is other. The symbolic terms in terms of otherness, they have been, we don't know much about them because there seems to be a complete lack of willing or interest in understanding what they're about. And that is definitely a George R. R. Martin critique. Calling them the others this is what we do. It's a psychological term, othering people. When we just caricature them, we don't try and understand who they are, what their struggles are. They're just over there, they're different. That is called othering people. It happens all the time, and George R. R. Martin is showing us that this is what's happened. They're literally building a wall between us, the civilized people, and the others. And so that is symbolically what he is trying to do here with the others. The white and black symbols, yeah, he plays a lot with color. What I would do is highly recommend, I can't remember when it was, my best guess is probably 2 years ago. I had Bronsteris on here, who excellent theoretician on this kind of symbolism. We talked about the different symbols of how George R. R. Martin uses the symbolism, particularly of things like the others, and the sort of archetypes of the different characters that he uses. And he does clearly create these archetypes, and sort of the white and the blue can often be the bad, and sort of the black and the dark can often be the good in this. But it's many more layered than that. The other thing, if you're interested in colors, can't even remember when this was, maybe 3 years ago. Sarah O'Connor, who is an amazing artist in and of her own right, came on and we talked about color symbolism in A Song of Ice and Fire. So if you're interested in that, please do go and check that one out. But you did ask me what my best guess is as to what the others want. And I think it's probably vengeance on the children of the forest for wrongs done unto them. It's my best guess at the moment. We have so little information. I can't emphasize this enough, that everything at this stage is going to be a best guess. But yeah, it seems that they want at the children of the forest rather than at humanity. That's where they're coming from. Chaos Ballerina picking up a question. Thank you very much for Bear Island Josh. Were the five forts possibly a bulwark against the others in the first long night? Can the others survive the story? I'll pick up on can the others survive the story in a moment. I've got a question from Mara Lee, my final patron question, so I'll wrap that up with that one. Bear Island Josh, were the five forts possibly a bulwark against the others in the first long night? Yes, I mentioned this a bit earlier in the stream. They do seem to be. We have the legends, if you go into the world of Ice and Fire, the legends from the far east of, and I can't remember the exact phrases, but basically these demon kind came and attacked from the far side there, and that's what the five forts are there to defend against. They are huge, they are impressive, they are oversized, they feel very much like what we've got with the walls. So yes, that's almost certainly the same thing that's going on at that part of the world. And picking up a question of thank you again, Chaos Ballerina, picking up for Ian Kaplinski. If the others were created as in the show or similar, if they were created, could they be targeting the Weirwood network itself along with the children? Yeah, I think that's entirely possible. If the target is the heart of the Weirwood network at the Isle of Faces, then that would be perfect. I mean, we're talking here about motivations. One thing which has crossed my mind, it's possible, but so I wouldn't put any money on it, but it's possible, is that they just want to end their own existence. Ultimately, they want to undo the magic that made them in the same way that probably everybody else does at some point, but they are created in order to attack and kill humans, and that's just part of their nature now. So they're going to do that in order to sweep everyone out of the way, but ultimately what they're wanting to do is undo the magic that created them. Question from Matt Savino saying, could the Night's Queen be the key to creating more others? Possibly the others are trying to get her back so they can make more of themselves. Kind of tinfoil, but I digress. Yeah, so the Night's Queen is an enigma. We don't know enough about her. The idea of trying to get her back is from a theory I know several people have, which is that she is what is in the bottom of the Winterfell crypts. The Winterfell crypts, as a reminder, are the original Winterfell. This is what was built first. The crypts were built first, and they were always intended as being a place for the Stark dead. It would appear all the way through from the very, very beginning. And it's all in very good repair, apart from at the very bottom, there's a caved-in section that we haven't ever been to see, so we don't know much more than that. But it's some of the older Starks, some of the very, very first Starks. Could this be where they took the Night's Queen and they just put her? They couldn't kill her for whatever reason, so they put her down there. I don't personally like this idea a huge amount, partly because why couldn't they just kill her? She had been the cause of a huge war. And some horrendous deeds. I think that we've been told that the First Men had a very kind of brutal lifestyle. Why would they imprison her? Secondly, I think there's an even better explanation for this. We have, for the caved-in section at the very bottom of the Winterfell crypts, we know that a couple of things. First of all, we know that the Night's King might have been a Stark, and the decision was made to expunge his name from history. One way that you can do that, if he is a Stark, and if he is, because Starks have to be buried there, then they don't want anybody to know who he is, so they just cave that section in, don't let anyone in. Was the 13th Lord Commander. If the House Stark was founded about the same sort of time, and it seems roughly right that it was. Bran the Builder is associated both with the building of Winterfell and with the building of the Wall, so that kind of tallies. Then we've got just the first few Starks who were there before him. Now, the question I have, given my theory that the statues will be raised into life by the blowing of the Horn of Winter, I'm not going to go into the details of that theory. I personally think it's relatively likely. I have done a video on it. But if that's the case, then what would have happened when the Horn of Winter was blown, as it was at that battle? We're told that it was supposed to bring the wall down, but it doesn't seem to have brought the wall down. So what could it else have done? The other thing we're told is it raises giants from the earth. If these are the giants who are raised from the earth, the statues, then they go into battle, they do what they need to do, and then what? well, you need to start again with building up your army of statues and dead Starks. You cave in the bottom section, and then you start again. So that's my explanation for what happened in that bottom section there. This was they're just starting again because that first bit had been used, and now they just need to build up the stockpile of Starks once more. Reflective rambling, picking up for Callie Summers, thank you. Tinfoil I've had for a bit. As Jon becomes more wolfish, he burns King's Landing. Dany kills him. Jon equals Nyssa and Dany equals Azor, the reverse of the show. Okay, this is interesting. So the Jon being more wolfish thing, for those who haven't picked up on this, I think this is very likely. The most likely way for Jon to be surviving his stabbing, his death, is that he projects himself, wargs himself into Ghost. There's lots of evidence that that's where this is going to go. If he does so, what we know is that in the long term, the skin changer who does that, they start to lose their own personality, and the personality of the wolf takes over. When Jon is then pulled back from there into his own body, as again seems to be the most likely thing to happen, then we don't know how long he will have been in Ghost, but he will be more wolfish. And there is one of George R. Martin's really good writing friends is Robin Hobb. I would highly recommend you look at the Assassin's Apprentice trilogy, the Farseer saga, for this in action. This was written at the same time that George R. Martin was writing Game of Thrones. But we've got that creating Jon being more wolfish. What does that mean in practice? A more wolfish version of Jon? Well, perhaps this means that he's more solitary. Maybe he's going to be quieter because Ghost is quieter. Maybe he's going to be more pack-like as well, ironically, with the Starks. Maybe he'll be more vicious. Would that make him more likely to burn down King's Landing? I don't think randomly burning down citizens is actually a wolfish thing to do. Wolves are there, they fight to eat, they eat their fill, and then they move on. He does his job and then he moves on. It's not a randomly killing lots of extra people with all of your anger. That's actually old Jon more getting angry and lashing out. His character does have anger management issues, it has to be said. But this idea of Dany stabbing Jon rather than Jon stabbing Dany, as happened on the TV show, I mean, I can see it. It could work either way, but I think for reasons I've given in previous videos, I think it's much more likely to be the way round that we saw on the TV show. DM Collins, again, thank you very much. Not an others question, but would you ever consider doing a traveler's guide to towns and areas in Middle Earth? Please, please, please. I've considered it many times. I would love to. I really would love to. I have come to the conclusion, unfortunately, that I don't think I'm going to be able to, and this is for copyright reasons. The Tolkien estate are very, very hot on copyright. Understandably so. This is their lifeblood. And anything that looks like it is infringing on their copyright, they clamp down on quickly. There are YouTube channels you may know who have been forced to change their names because the Tolkien estate said your name is too closely associated with things that we have the copyright for. They take things down all the time. I don't think I would be able to get away with doing a traveler's guide to Middle Earth in the same way. I can do videos about different places, I am sure, but actually doing something which is slightly more creative and immersive, I don't think that I would be able to get away with. So I would love to, but I don't think I will be able to. Mara Lee, last question from my patrons, saying, once we have defeated both fire and ice and they pull back, do you someday see the others returning after all they did after the long night? So after the end of this story, is it possible the others return? Well, this, I think, and this is why I wanted to end on this one, I think this comes back around to this fundamental point of how is the threat from the others going to be ended? If it is just a battle, if it is just that humanity figures out how to mine lots of dragon glass and get it to the front line and kill lots of baddies, and yay, we've won the war. If it is that, then yeah, they will just go away and they will hibernate again, and then they could come back again much later. I don't think it will be that, though. That doesn't feel like the kind of story this is. If it is undoing the magic that created the others in the first place, brought the others into existence in Planetos in the first place, if it's undoing that and they are then no longer there, then no, they're not going to come back unless somebody creates them again with another spell, but presumably they wouldn't. So if the ending is as it seems likely to be, an undoing of that creation that resets the seasons of the planet as well, then no, they're not going to come back. Dragons, I know we're often thinking about how do we get this kind of balance. Dragons are in Westeros, but in Essos and Planetos, that there's a potential for them to come back. There could be dragon eggs over in the Shadowlands, who knows? So the potential is there for them to come back. I do like this possible idea that maybe both could come back, but they have both been pushed away for the time being. That does add to some kind of balance idea, but no, personally, I don't. I think the most likely answer here is that they're not going to be around. They will be actually properly unmade in some way. Let's just have a quick look in the chat. Perfumed Manatee saying the Blue Wizard's Guide to Middle Earth. They wouldn't be great because they only went over to the far east areas that we do not know, so that wouldn't be particularly happy. The Astra Inclinant saying the shadows come to stay, my lord. This is a Patchface quote. If that's about the others, they yet to stay, as in they're not just popping in. I don't think we should take Patchface and interpret them too literally, in my view, but maybe. Curse Ballerina saying Dragon Warg, will Dany's death be related to defeating the others, or do you think it is self-sacrifice or as a killer, John? I mean, I don't know. I think that it's not a self-sacrifice thing. I mean, I think she will die. I think the question is the extent to which George R. R. Martin heads down that route of what happens after the end of the others, or whether he does bring them, as the original idea was, to bring everything in together and resolve everything at once. But it's what is the Scouring of the Shire? We know the Scouring of the Shire feel is how he's going to end with the main A Song of Ice and Fire story. How is that going to be? What is the Shire in this? Is it King's Landing? Is that something that needs to be dealt with, or are we talking Cersei and Euron? And I think with that, I'm going to start bringing this one to a close. Thank you, moderators, for an amazing job again today. Thank you. There were some really interesting questions, some fantastic ideas coming out today as well. Next week, I will have a Lord of the Rings live stream. It's going to be about Galadriel. We're going to be looking at her. She's actually got a really interesting character arc when you start building into diving into the detail of Tolkien's world. Some areas that are quite grey and hazy, some areas that are very clear. She is a fascinating character. So that's going to be next week. If you are watching this back later, appearing somewhere around here will be a link to some other live streams I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to my Patreon page. If you would like to support this channel, that's the best way to do it. But that is all from me. Take care, everyone, and I shall see you again next week.